Hi, this is Jen Cheek with the Farmers Market Coalition, here for the Trust But Verify Practical Tips to Build Vendor Integrity at Your Farmers Market webinar. I just want to make sure quickly that everyone can hear us okay and that you can see our PowerPoint. You should see the cover slide at this time. If someone can just go ahead and write in the chat box and let us know that you can see everything and hear everything, we'll get going. And Colleen, can you go to the next slide for me? I want to make sure before we start that everyone knows how to use the webinar controls. You should, on your right-hand side of your screen, have a GoToWebinar control panel that looks something like this. And you'll see that there's a section there on audio where the arrow is. You can either listen by plugging into your computer and using your computer microphones, or you can listen in via phone call. So select which option you prefer there. If you're having a hard time hearing, just try the other option, and usually one is better than the other. And the next slide. And we want to make sure that throughout the webinar you have your questions answered. We're so excited to have Colleen Donovan with us today, and she is going to leave plenty of time to take some questions at the end of the webinar. You can see the little arrow next to the questions portion of the GoToWebinar control panel. You just click on that, and the next slide, and it'll open up and you can enter questions in throughout the webinar. And at the end of Colleen's talk, we will go through those questions and get everything answered. And if we can't make it to all the questions, we'll follow up with an email to everyone after. So please do feel free to enter questions throughout the webinar. And next slide. And this is one of the Farmers Market Coalition's professional development webinars. FMC is a member-based organization for those of you with us today who aren't already members. These webinars are free to members and are a small fee to those who aren't members. And we're very excited to have Colleen Donovan with us today to talk about farmer verification. We know that customers have felt very removed and misled by their conventional food systems, which brought them to farmers markets in the first place. So farmers markets were really based on this culture of trust. There are plenty of reasons to visit farmers markets nowadays, like events and socializing and educational opportunities. But the real core of farmers markets remains in that opportunity to purchase food directly from the person who grew it. And there's a huge value in this consumer to farmer trust. And this is evidenced by how heavily everyone's using the terms like local, homegrown, and farm stand in marketing products and companies. And as a market manager, you really have to protect that value by actively maintaining and reinforcing your customers' trust in your market and your farmers. And trust really starts with your market's mission, which is then translated into market rules and policies and comes with a system of verification and enforcing those rules and policies, and also includes how you promote that system to your customers so they know what your rules are and how you're enforcing them, so they can feel really confident that when they show up to the farmers market, they know exactly what they're getting. So we're very interested in Colleen's presentation today because we know that markets are working with limited resources, time, and staff capacity. So enforcing these rules and making sure that you have good rules in place can take a lot of time and energy. So we're going to provide some easy ways to do that. The next slide, please. And it's extremely important that you're proactive about being clear on your market's policies and the systems of verification in place, because it prepares you for when customers do question your farmer's integrity, which is happening more and more now that we have all these national press coverage opportunities for when there is a negative experience at the market. Even if some of these articles which have come out recently, even if they weren't in your state or even in your region of the country, customers see these and it immediately brings them to question what's happening at their market. So, and the issue has become enough of a concern that even at the opening of the USDA Farmers Market this year, the Secretary of Agriculture mentioned the issue in his remarks and encouraged markets to hold close the value that comes with farmer-customer relationships. So we really want to put market managers in a place where they can proactively be ready for when their customers are questioning. And next slide, please. And FMC members have been having these conversations for some time now, and there are some great resources available that Colleen will reference. Many of these are in FMC's resource library. So at farmersmarketcoalition.org, if you check out our resources section, you'll see the resource library, which has a category you can click on. You'll see on the left-hand side there is farm inspection and enforcement, and we have resources that have been submitted to us by markets, by research organizations that you can feel free to use and modify for your own market. And next slide. And we also have webinars. So under resources you can see our webinars page, which is old webinars, and you'll see in that first row right there we have one called Truth and Transparency Farm Audits for Producer-Only Integrity, which is sort of the gold standard of farm inspections offered by the Agricultural Institute of Marin. So that was if you have as many resources as possible and you want to do the full gamut, that's definitely a webinar to check out. We know that not everyone has the capacity to do that, so we want to provide a variety of options and ways that you can go about verifying your farmers are actually producing what they're selling at the market. So that's why we're very, very excited to have Colleen here with us. Colleen Donovan is going to share the research she has been doing to identify practical methods for farmer verification. And next slide. Colleen began her career in international development, primarily in Latin America in the early 1990s. And for the last 14 years, she has been focused on community-based, just food systems, sustainable livestock, immigrant farming, and alternative marketing on the West Coast. And since 2009, she worked with Washington State University Small Farms Program on the Farmers Market Action Team and the Washington State Farmers Market Association to research and analyze market management practices, the community impact of farmers markets, market manager experiences, vendor characteristics, and farmer verification practices in Washington. She's created numerous educational and promotional resources for farmers markets in Washington, including the Washington State Farmers Market Management Toolkit, which is a very popular resource among FMC membership. Colleen has a BA from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and a master's in geography from the University of Washington. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you for all of you who have taken the time to be part of this webinar today. And thank you. That was an excellent introduction, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of what we're learning and trying out here in Washington to contribute to this larger national conversation around farmers market integrity. And of course, I'm always eager to hear what you found that works for you in your region or state as well. It's something we're all working on, and I hope this can contribute to you in your work in some way as we march forward. Fortunately, here in Washington, we have some really strong partners who have been working, as Jen mentioned, on this issue for a very long time, and I'll do my best to represent our team effort to you today. I'm going to start out with the big picture and then zero in on some of the tips that we've found especially helpful for those markets who are not part of a statewide or regional system and are strapped in terms of capacity. So, and we're very appreciative to all of our partners, especially USDA. The Federal State Marketing Improvement Program has funded much of this work so far, and they've been a terrific partner. So just to get us situated here, I'm in Washington State. I live in Ellensburg, which is the middle carrot. And Washington has had a statewide association since the late 70s. So it's one of the older associations. And with that, we've had what we call our roots guidelines, which really define some standards for farmers market members as well as vendor categories. However, we don't have any statewide farmers market or vendor certification program, and we really don't have any public agencies solely dedicated to farmers markets. So it's been on the shoulders of individual market organizations to try and problem solve how to really tackle this. So, and we're in close communications with Idaho and Oregon as well, and I know every state is different and every region is different, but hopefully some of what we're thinking about will help apply to you in where you're situated. And again, Jen touched on the issue of consumer trust, core feature of farmers market, and this is a piece of being proactive to build and protect that very precious asset about why shoppers shop at farmers markets and why farmers who have lots of options these days choose to sell at farmers markets. We know that farmers market integrity and market integrity is not a new issue. It's been around probably since the dawn of commerce, and that it's one of those ongoing challenges. Our attention, as Jen alluded to, also really kind of was getting our attention a few years back, where there were a number of headlines popping out, especially around Southern California, that really motivated us to take the next step in terms of figuring out a statewide solution. We're really fortunate here in that there's a lot of vendor support to create some sort of statewide solution. We got to figure out what that is, but really the farm vendors really seem to want a program of some sort. And likewise, market managers are very concerned about the issue as well, and they have really spoken quite clearly that they're motivated and want to participate as well. But as you probably know, and as Jen mentioned, it's really challenging to, even if you have a strong policy, it's really challenging to put that into practice for a whole variety of reasons I'm sure you're very familiar with. And layered on top of this is, just increasing challenges in terms of geographic difference, the difference in agroecological regions. Farmers are coming further. There might be language challenges. There might be technology differences in who can communicate how. Not to mention all of the layering of work and demands on farmers markets. So it's really tough for a single market manager to do a good job. And also, we know farmers and shoppers look to managers to be kind of the curator of who's at the market. So it's a real challenge. So in that context, we're working on a farmers market integrity project. It's a work in progress. This is the piece that's we've got some grant funding to support. Our advisory team is made up of the markets, farmers, USDA, our State Department of Agriculture, our State Farmers Market Association, and I'm representing Washington State University, which is our land grant. And what I want to do is tell you a little bit about what we're learning, and then also to kind of dig into some of the things that hopefully you can do tomorrow. And so our big picture goal here is, this ensuring public's trust in what's sold at farmers markets in Washington State, exactly what Jen referred to. And we also want to really kind of use this as a mechanism to help professionalize the markets and the farmers, and so that we can, every market can thrive. So I want to step back a tiny bit first and think about farmers market integrity and what do I mean by that and what do we mean by that. And my observation is that there's been multiple intersecting conversations around some type and some level of farmers market integrity, and at many, many levels throughout the country. And so I I just have to think about them in kind of 3 big buckets here, and hopefully this will help us to all be on the same page when we're thinking about this. So the first big bucket is, the faux farmers market, where it is clearly not a farmers market. And so here we have Home Depot in Wenatchee, and I'm going to say that's not a farmers market. And so we have this proliferation as farmers markets become more and more successful, that their name and image and everything else gets evoked. Whether it's the Sprouts grocery store chain, or there's farmers market dog treats, and Overstock online has a farmers market. So this is one trend that's out there that we as a community need to be mindful of. The second big bucket is a little bit more nuanced, and I think the Farmers Market Coalition and others have really been working on thinking through, what is that right vendor mix, and how do you avoid a slippery slope that, delves it closer and closer to street fairs, and how do we keep the focus on farmers, and how do we keep the farmers coming in farmers markets, and how do we balance, like Jen mentioned, the mission and with the community demands and the shopper demands, and what vendors are sending in their applications to you. So how do you manage, and how do we keep that focus on farmers so that we continue to have real farmers markets? However that's conceived, because there's absolutely not one size fits all, but we need to have some delineation of what's a farmer's market. And then the third kind of big bucket that we've been thinking about and working on is this question of, for lack of a better term, honest or honorable representation. And it's representation of vendors to the market, of vendors to each other, of vendors to the shoppers. And I think, as most of you probably have experienced, that it's really driven right now by the vendors and the markets. And it's a question of being accurate, it's a question of being complete, and it's a question of how do we know that. And our focus at the moment is really thinking about, are you who you say you are in growing and raising what you sell, following the market policies. There's another kind of corollary that's a second step that's very related, which is all about production claims, and that's another very important piece. Our focus at the moment is really on the business itself, but that's also, they all tie together at some level. And so we use the word integrity, and it kind of fits very much in with the culture of trust, and it's about consistency of values, expectations, actions, methods, and ethics. And so it's not determining for you what those are, but we need some systems that have consistency. And so integrity is really a means of getting there, as well as an end to our market systems, which I know you know. And it gets a little interesting in terms of when you kind of can tease out, it really embodies this range of issues. And at least in our state, it's shocking, but there can be some misunderstandings in terms of the information provided by vendors on their applications, and sometimes it's very honest and just somebody didn't get to it or didn't complete it for whatever reason, and then it can slip into more and more serious charges of misrepresentation, and even as far as consumer fraud. And so I think it's important, as you're thinking about these issues in your own market, or the markets you sell at or run, is trying to delineate which is which. Is it a matter of not following market policies or rules, the health department regulations, or is it outright breaking the law? And I think we have to calibrate the energy and investment we make, depending on what the issue is. And so, so we started out by, looking around at all the good work all of you have been doing and thinking about, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And so, this this is just a really general overview. This could be a separate webinar in and of itself, but looking at all of the different approaches around the country. And so I kind of think of them in 4 buckets. We know a lot about the California Certified Farmers Market System, which is state legislated and has the statewide Department of Food and Ag very involved, as well as the county level ag commissioners, as well as the markets. And then we also have different programs in which a market association, such as Green Market in New York, creates their own internal audit department or farm inspection department. So they have invested internally to serve the farms and the markets that participate in their system. And the Farmers Market Coalition has the webinar that Jen mentioned on with the Marin Farmers Market, the Ag Institute of Marin has done in terms of the California certification program, and then they've gone above and beyond and created their own audit program as well. So they've combined these two. There's another webinar about Green Market's program as well that's excellent. So, but there's pros and cons to each of these, right? And the third kind of bucket would be what I've seen in, for example, in the Green City markets in Chicago, where they will say, okay, if I understand it correctly, in order to participate in our market, you have we will ask you to have one of 8 different independent third-party certifications, ranging from certified organic to certified naturally grown to there's some that are appropriate for livestock. And so that's their kind of approach to having some level of farm verification in their system. And then another type that's at the market level is a voluntary vendor program where you can opt in as a vendor to have an additional inspection, which enables you to have an additional signage. In this case, an example would be from the Fulton Street Market in Grand Rapids, where they have a 100% homegrown program where they can opt in to participate, pay a fee, get some additional certification, and have some signage that goes with it. And so there's lots of different approaches, and this is a very kind of general overview. And would love to talk more and hear more about what's going on in your part of the country. But what we wanted to do was to learn from each of these and figure out what was going to work for us in Washington. And so our model that we've been working on through this project and with our advisory team is twofold. And I'm going to just kind of go over this pretty quickly, but wanted to give you a little bit of context. And so part of this, again, is kind of creating this culture of integrity where we have shared information and we really are supportive to farmers and to markets to be able to build everybody's standards and professionalize the markets, and also have something that has some real teeth in it so that there are consequences. And that's been a challenge to really have that enforcement level and to really make sure that everything is legally vetted so that we put markets in the best possible standing when there actually, is a very serious problem. And part of the strategy for us is really investing in this culture of integrity, in part because we will have to figure out a business model that sustains us over the long haul, which means that we probably won't be able to afford a lot of farm visits. And so what can we be doing to not be so reliant on that piece of the puzzle? And so our hope is that over time we'll be able to really have a system that becomes self-enforcing, and yet there is some mechanisms in case there is an issue. And again, potential benefits, I know, we've talked about this, this. Sometimes I like to bring this up because, at least in my experience, sometimes within a market, the manager does a lot of educating of board members may be educating a new market manager, and so it's always good to have some things written down to be able to get everybody on the same page within a market. And again, I just wanted to emphasize the goal here, we're trying to set up a win-win-win so that we're adding value to the markets, we're adding value to the vendors, and ultimately to the shoppers to keep them at farmers markets. So one of the pieces that we think about a lot is this idea of really being able to triangulate information. In my experience here in Washington, when there's a question about a vendor, the first line of thinking is well, we need to do a farm visit. And that would be great in a perfect world, but as we know, there's lots of capacity issues, and there's big geographic distances, and there's all kinds of reasons why that's not possible. So what are some ways that we can think about the information within a whole market context? And so this would start from the information collected on the market application, and that's information that's provided by the vendor. So again, it's not some gotcha campaign. It's saying, hey, this is what you told us. Let's verify that. Intersecting with that, of course, is what the market manager or folks see at the market. So what is on the table? When is it on the table? What is the condition? What is the quality? Does it sync up with what was said in the application? And the third piece of this is, what's on farm? Is what we're seeing on the table and what's in the application syncing up with what's on farm? And again, the more that those three pieces are consistent and sync up, the more confidence we can have in the vendor. Because as a market manager in California told me early on, even the best evidence of production really is not proof of production at the market. We will never be able to, definitively trace that cherry back to this grower, and even if we could, I'm not sure that's where we want to be putting our resources. So we have to really figure out ways to get as much information to increase our confidence to a really reasonable level. So for our approach, we're thinking about, a common vendor application. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. This idea of desk audits, which I'll also talk about, and then marrying that with as-needed farm inspections, as well as, additional consistency in terms of signage, training managers so they really know how to interpret what they're seeing in the market, and having some fair and systematic responses. So I also wanted to just kind of distinguish between a farm visit and a farm inspection. And farm visits are really important to farmers and from markets to build relationships, to get to know each other for promotional reasons, and they just love it. I mean, I go around and everybody will remember. They name every single market manager that's been to their farm. And I just wanted to distinguish that in terms of an inspection, in terms of the extra level of formality and the purpose of the inspection. So just a slide to kind of help think through what it is you're doing and try and present it as such. So getting back to the common vendor application, this was a concept that comes from the fact that we have, like I said, we have over 165 different markets and probably 100 different market applications. And so vendors can understandably go a little crazy filling out all their applications. And likewise, markets have more and more applications to check and to manage, and also all of the additional levels of information and licensing and permits to follow up on. And it's really this onerous task. And so our thinking is to the degree we can synchronize the information we ask and the way that information is managed to save time and effort for farmers, increase our confidence in the information provided, as well as providing good value and service to farmers markets. And so the hope is that this is a win-win. And right now this is in the kind of in the feasibility stage, and we're finalizing what the right questions are. It's been a real learning process just figuring out the right questions. Ultimately, we'd like to see this in some information technology, so it's online and easy for everybody with that really strong service component. But even as a first step, just really sharing the types of questions to ask has been helpful. And so part of what we're going for here, and I talk about this a lot, is, you know, what is a really legitimate red flag at the market? And it's really tricky, especially our market managers come from every possible background, and even if they do have knowledge and expertise in agriculture, there's so much diversity in terms of, you know, berries to dairies to tree fruit to leafy greens. There's just a plethora of information to understand, and so we want to really think through what are those, you know, when are those times when you need to pay attention, and when are those times you need to take a step back, and maybe it's actually okay. And so these are just some times that, you know, I think through in terms of legitimate red flags, you know, which includes subjective stuff like, hey, that just doesn't, you know, we shouldn't have oranges at our market in Washington. But then there's the tricky nature of, what about the shoulder season? The shoulder seasons can be very tricky in terms of what comes on from what region and when, and there's certain crops that just are really tricky and contentious. And so thinking about it by region, by market, by season, by crop, it's a lot to understand and learn. And so thinking about this helps to know when to respond. So what we don't want to try and get too caught up on, which is impossible, which is, you know, all of the different frustration that comes out, especially from other vendors, about other vendors, and you know, hopefully you don't have that challenge in your region, but it's certainly one we've experienced, and there's a lot of legitimate frustration out there over time. But we need to be very careful about falling into you know, hearsay, basically. So I really recommend, you know, training. You know, it's a skill, being able to actively listen without signaling necessarily agreeance. You know, if you can at your market have some written protocols, there's some great complaint forms online that you can copy. I think the Portland Farmers Market Vendor Handbook has a terrific protocol. To the degree that's really appropriate for your market, getting things in writing goes a long way towards being able to respond, and also having an outlet for some frustration. So what do you do if it is a legitimate red flag, and, you know, something's just not right? Why is there celery at the market? Why does everybody's stuff look the same? What's going on here? So, you know, easier said than done, but try to resist the temptation to jumping straight to a guilty verdict, or conversely, straight to an innocent verdict. I think that to the degree we can really have some training in terms of how to respond and assess things and know what is the appropriate next question to ask to get that information to help you assess, it goes a long way towards a fair process that everybody can opt into and have confidence in, and that perception of fairness, and that is extremely important, and probably as important as reality. So try to, you know, think through what is the information you going to help you to answer what the question is. And so towards that end, one of the things that we've been talking about here in Washington, and that has been a helpful tool that we borrowed from the organic program, is this idea of desk audits. And maybe some of you do those already, and I just wanted to share a little bit. This is kind of in the practical tips category. And so what it is, it's taking the information provided to you by the vendor and looking at public records that are online or from your own resources to verify what they have told you. And so, and this of course is going to be probably more important for markets that are outside of a certification system. But again, we're looking for things that that can sync up, that give us confidence, that indicate that everything is complete and accurate, right? So what it can do is to give you some more green lights. To the degree things sync up, you get more green lights, increase your confidence. You have some track record, some notes to kind of go on. There might be some yellow lights that kind of indicate, hey, what we need to find out more information. It's not an indicator of guilt. It's just a situation where you need more information. And, you know, and then there are those occasional red lights like, wow, something is not right. And that's when you can really kind of amp up the response and the seriousness of it. So a few examples of the desk audit that we've been working on here. One is very simply our universal business identifier. And in Washington State, and maybe in your state, I would think so, there's an equivalent. Our Department of Revenue has a lookup. So you can put in the UBI number that the vendor gave you in the application and find out a little something about their status. So this tells us, do I have the entity name right? Is the business name correct? Is the address correct? Or is it similar or the same? Is the account open or closed? You wouldn't believe the number of times that I've looked up UBIs and the account is closed. And so what does this mean? So that warrants a conversation. Hey, what's going on here? Your business license number isn't open. Can you tell me about this? And again, we're trying. It's not necessarily a gotcha, but it's all of those little pieces that come together to give you confidence that that business is operating under standard business practices and that your vendor is who they say they are. We can take it a step further and also look up licenses. And here in Washington State, a lot of things are under the specialty license category. And again, if you ask for the licenses in your application and they say they have them, you can simply go online to check if there's a question or to give yourself additional confidence. So this is a specialty business license, so we can see and we can look up, and it gives us a little bit more information. A lot of times I'll look to see if they have a scale license or a minor work permit license. And again, I'm not out there to kind of catch anybody, but to get a sense of how thorough they are in terms of their permitting and licensing, and also be able to say, hey, did you know you don't have this up to date? You might want to consider doing that, or alternatively, our market requires it. So you can calibrate that. A few more for certified organic producers. Our State Department of Ag lists those certified producers. So if somebody says they're certified organic by USDA, they should be on this list. And it has everybody organized by county. There they are. Great. And again, it just gives you another green light to say, yes, you are providing accurate and complete information. And at the national level, there is a USDA Organic Integrity Database that has operations is certified by any agency. So if you're in a region that has multiple certifiers, your certified grower should be on this list. And then if you don't know about it, the USDA has put out this organic labeling at farmers markets. And again, this goes to the signage issue and having more resources for managers so they know, and when they question or they call attention to a particular practice, giving them more tools, having everybody on the same page, having consistent messages so there's no excuse not to know them. All of those things I think really help to add to confidence in our vendors. This is, again, similar concept with pesticide licensing. And this, if you're a tree fruit grower in our state, most are required. But again, if like just last week I looked up a grower, name wasn't on here, so that warranted a question, and it turned out that his farm manager, it was under her name. So it's just more information so you can ask the right questions. And then the last thing I just wanted to kind of share is something that's been very effective for us and important is this whole question of farm location and address. And it may seem completely self-evident, but it's in practice, there's a wide range of practices in market applications. And so there's a minimum of 2 addresses you want to ask. One is the mailing address and one is the business location. And so the farms these days will typically have multiple parcels. And so it's not enough usually just to ask their physical location of the farm. A better question is, where are you getting, or where are you producing the goods that you will be selling at market? And then that's a broader question, so that you should be able to have information about everything you see on the table. And so this is some detailed information about the types of questions if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, but they make a difference, right? Does what they're telling you on their application and what you're seeing at market kind of match what you're seeing in terms of the farm description? And it's always tricky to want to kind of sync up yield versus production versus markets, and it's just really tricky because farms have so many different production techniques. You need such nuanced agroeconomic information, plus the different markets that diversified farmers use. That's a pretty tricky thing to do. But at least if you know where what they're selling comes from, that's a good start. And here's just an example of one farm we visited who had 6 different parcels of different sizes, of different arrangements, of different crops and levels of formality. So it's especially true when you're a beginning farmer or limited reach farmer or doing some sort of crop that's very capital intensive, like tree fruit. There's all kinds of different arrangements folks are using to create their businesses. Asking for a crop map or farm map can be very helpful, and if they're certified organic, in our state, that's included within the application, so you can add that to your application. Can you please give me a copy of the map that you submitted to with your organic application? And again, it's just one more piece of information that tells you more about the operation. You can also use Google Maps if you have the addresses, and you can have some basic information about what's there, what's not there. Google Earth can also be used, and again, you can at least tell, is there tree fruit, is there row crops, is there pasture? There's some basic things. Google Earth can also sometimes go back historically, which is interesting for perennials. And then you can even take it a step further, and for us, each county has property searches, and again, this property search will take you to the next level and be able to tell you the owner, the acreage, and how it's zoned. And again, these things should line up. If somebody has an apartment building as their farm production, well, that would be a legitimate red flag, and you would want to find out more. And again, these are things that you can be doing from your computer. And our state, there's some more, this is a GIS interactive map of crops that kind of tells you the region. It's probably a little bit too nuanced, but there are other databases out there that if you need to, you can dig into. And again, this is an example of a way of finding out information without necessarily having to invest in a farm inspection or farm visit. So those are a few of the desktop tools, and I'm going to end with some key points, and I look forward to your questions. And so again, just some general tips. I imagine some of you are superstars already doing a lot of this, but just want to reiterate that perception is really as powerful as reality, and vendors have long memories, and markets have long memories, and so it's really important to have a clear, transparent, proactive process to get the perception right as well as reality. And that we're really trying to work to ask those right questions so that we get the right results, right? And let's just see. So, I guess the only things I haven't mentioned so far is really the importance of documenting your process as well as results. And photos are great. And really to keeping that information well organized and private and secure will enhance the trust of the system and of individual vendors. You know, and there's could be, you know, proprietary information. Sometimes they're not telling you for a reason, and so, you know, they know that it's private and secure to the degree possible. That will go a long ways towards getting their confidence in us. And lastly, I just, you know, keep the big picture goal in mind. We want to serve farms, we want to serve markets, we want a win-win, and we need to focus on the bigger issues first, and work to kind of get everybody up to some good standards so that we can be very proud of our market integrity. Okay, and that was what I had to say. Jen, this is your slide.
Yes, we just wanted to reiterate that there are resources available in FMC's resource library, and we'll be putting some of the resources that Colleen has mentioned that aren't currently in there. We'll put those in there as well so you can access them there under the farm inspection and enforcement category. And I think was that the last slide?
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Okay.
So well, this is the last slide, and I know I covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure you have some great questions.
Yes, thank you so much. Like you said, this could be a series of webinars, particularly, I'm sure, as your research progresses on the common application. We're going to want to follow up with you and hear how that goes next year. And one question, we have some good questions that have come in. One thing that I wanted to start off with is that you mentioned some really great resources within Washington State, like the State Department of Ag and the USDA Organic Integrity Database and the County Property Search. Do you share a list of all the places where you're going to validate the information from the vendor applications with the markets and the vendors up front before you begin that process?
Well, right now our strategy has been to share with individual markets that they exist and how they can be used, and with the thinking that they would be able to do it themselves. So our hope has been to say, hey, these tools are out here, here's some context, if they're useful, and then as we move forward with a statewide program, the intention would be to, again, be transparent about how we're doing things, but really build it from the ground up so that, you know, these are publicly available resources and they can be used in these ways.
Fantastic. And we have a couple questions in here. This one's from Peg Tennant, wondering how verbal agreements regarding land sharing could be verified. And she says they require at a minimum of a signed letter. Is that something that you've
Peg.
seen?
Yeah. Hi, Peg. So that's a great question, and it's surprisingly, surprisingly common how the wide range of agreements and the levels of informality that exist. I've seen them, two-liners. I've seen them written and signed in, multiple languages. So if you have a verbal, I would just take a common sense approach in either. There's two ways to approach it. One is that you as a market, and you have to decide what's right for you, and you can say verbal agreements are not acceptable within our market policies. That we need to have a written agreement. You could take it a step further, and you can say we need to have a written agreement that's notarized. That's a step further. Or alternatively, you can have say verbal agreements are acceptable because of the pragmatic realities of where you are and knowing the players at hand. And then I would suggest to have some sort of confirmation from both sides of the party, right? So, but that's tricky, and it's a step forward for us to even know that there's a verbal, what kind of agreement is there if there's a lease situation. And just having that knowledge that it's a verbal versus a written versus a contract, that's progress in terms of knowing that. And then you as a market can decide what's acceptable. And in the case of a verbal, if that's acceptable, and it very well may be, then, because we don't want to make things too complicated for farmers, then at least having both sides of the party being able to verify that it exists, right? We have a big challenge with crop share arrangements, and those are really tricky, and I think we're still learning about how they work and what's going to be acceptable for markets and what's not.
Great. And we have a question here from Erica Motes, who asks, what experience do you have with validating the way vendors are verbally representing their product? She occasionally hears comments such as, we don't use any harmful chemicals. These are vague and potentially misleading, maybe a secret shopper to gather or make notes.
Yeah, that's a great question, another great question, and it is true that verbally misrepresenting your products and your production methods is a form of consumer fraud, verbal consumer fraud. However, like you're pointing out to, how do you know, and how do you monitor that? And I don't think our Attorney General is going to go, cracking down on farmers at farmers markets. Fortunately, we don't want that. So that's tricky, and again, I think that part of the solution, at least our thinking, it could be in terms of the signage standards and having some agreement about what it means. I know that some markets, Santa Monica, for example, if I'm not mistaken, does not allow signs that say no spray. And so the monitoring and regulating what the signage is could be one point of intervention from a market. I know another market, also in California, that will not allow any vendor to make any claim that's not written. Therefore, if the farmer or the vendor is making a claim, it needs to be on a sign. Now, that gets tricky too. You still need to verify the signs, and also, it's again the monitoring. Do you send around a secret shopper? How do you monitor that? Is it complaint based? And also, farms, as you know, especially ones that have built farmers markets into their business strategy and are going to 10 or 15 or multiple markets, they have to hire seasonal staff, and that training of the seasonal staff isn't always as robust and complete as we would like around market rules and customer service and what you can say and not say. And so there's lots of opportunity for there's lots of opportunity for this to happen in either intentionally or unintentionally. And so it's, I think, starting with the market policies, being very clear about what those are, and yeah, and it's really tricky. So sorry, Erica, that's not a perfect answer, but I empathize with the challenge.
Yes, definitely. Go ahead.
No, and the whole signage on the no sprays things is a little, it's a real challenge, and yeah, and it's very, very important and very important to people, and it's and so some markets will try and only let the certified organic kind of get up there and be posted, and anyway, it's really challenging.
Mm-hmm. And we are getting a couple questions about developing those policies and what's the best mix of produce versus non-produce, and how to create a policy that is going to be functional at your market. And this question from Roxanne is is similar in that they have found during crop devastation, farmers markets want to resell non-local just to keep their customers and help them survive financially. And she has found that transparency of what we let them do is the answer, rather than sticking to our guns and having a few of our farmers go bankrupt. So, Colleen, do you have thoughts?
That's a great, yeah, that's
a,
okay, yeah, in my thinking, what I really like about that comment is that it allows the farmer to survive, which is what we want, and with that transparency, the shoppers know, the market knows, and people can make good decisions, right? So I think that there's some real strength in having that flexibility to say, really focusing on the core values, and in this case it's transparency, so that what we don't want is a farmer being, this is, they're very stressed. It's, there's payroll to meet. If there's crop failure or weather does wacky things or a truck breaks down or a kid gets sick, there's some really seriously stressful situations. So having the ability to say, yes, we will work with you, and here's how we're going to deal with it by having the appropriate signage, then I think that's very, very, from my perspective, that's very productive if it syncs up with your market mission and goals and so on and so forth. The key there is having a little bit of thought in advance, and also having that relationship and that trust with the vendor and the market, so that when that situation arises, the answer should be have a conversation with the market manager. Not try and figure it out and sneak something in, but have a conversation with the market manager. And there's a big difference between, an outright wholesale reseller versus supplementing. And supplementing is the hardest piece to monitor, because that, somebody may be adding on to a crop they already have and figuring it out and extending their season, or, like I said, they're helping out a neighbor, or they have payroll. Those are the kind of more benign motives, right? But it's tricky, and so I really, really think that you're onto something there by keeping the transparency as the kind of operational value, and also having thought through some of the market policies in advance, or at least having a procedure. So what you don't want is an ad hoc, one-off decision that you make on the fly, and then a board member reacts too strongly because they have a different opinion and aren't thinking about it quite the same way. So, it's about communication and having some system for kind of responding. But
fantastic. And so we have a couple of questions coming in about actual application questions and the best things to ask and how to ask them. Is there an application format that is being made available through your research? Is that going to be shared publicly, or is this going to be an internal Washington State document?
Well, our thinking, if, again, I'm hoping I'm representing our team correctly, but our thinking, or at least my thinking, is that the more, and I know we are all individuals, but, to the degrees we can have some workable standards that take the guesswork out or take the variability out, so that everybody can know what to expect and collect the right information and respond in the same way, that it will help the farmers and help the markets, because the markets want want complete and accurate information, and the farmers just want to get the forms in, right? Also, as a side note, never assume they truly understand how farmers markets work. It's just very, it's very important to constantly be reiterating and educating your vendors about how markets work. Okay, that's a side point. But at any rate, I'm happy to, we're happy to, there's no proprietary secret to the information we're collecting and the right questions. I feel like it's been a really interesting learning experience that I'd love to share, and if it's useful for you, that's terrific, because there's all these nuances, and what we don't want is to just ask every question under the sun because we're curious or think about it, whereas we really want to dig down to those 5 or 6 or those key questions that are going to get us, be those real indicators of their farm operation. So, for example, just real quick, I've been learning a lot about marketing orders recently, and so there are some, we have a marketing order for cherries and for pears in our state, among other things, but the key ones, the cherries, are just, that's a very contentious crop in our state, and it makes a big difference if somebody is going through, operates and also sells to a warehouse and has their fruit inspected. And so, just the questions about learning to ask, do you have your fruit inspected? Are you part of a marketing order? Do you sell to a warehouse also? Because it tells you a little bit about what to expect in terms of the quality and condition of the fruit at the market. So that's another kind of way to double check things. Also, to the degree we know there's somebody else on farm checking things off, that reduces our need to do a farm visit or farm inspection. And so we're trying to kind of be as efficient as possible and leverage those other pieces. Asking about dry storage, asking about cold storage, I've learned to really appreciate those things. So yeah, I'm happy. We're happy to share. I think we'll learn from you just as much as, hopefully what we have developed is helpful for our state.
Great, fantastic. Well, we're just past the hour, Colleen. Thank you so much for being with us today. We have plenty of questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, so we'll be following up with you, and we'll be getting this webinar up online, both in PDF and in the recorded form. And we'll try to send out an email and post to the listserv with some more answers to your great questions here. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. And Colleen, if you don't mind switching to the last slide for just a second, I wanted to mention that FMC's poster contest is being released today. The poster contest is open to anyone with a 2016 Farmers Market poster, and you can submit it online. You can see it on our website at farmersmarketcoalition.org. We have cash prizes to our favorite posters. We're going to be displaying them during National Farmers Market Week in DC, as well as other places around the country. We did this in 2014, and it was a huge success. We got some amazing market posters. You can check them out on our Facebook page, and we hope that you'll apply this year and help promote the great things going on at your market, or maybe even some of the rules and policies and mission that are helping you in this process. So thank you again for everyone for being here, and to Colleen, and we will sign off.